right? So if 100% literacy is our goal, 100% reservation should be the way, and it is the only way possible, I guess. Yeah, yes. Thank you so much. I was doing some other work. I was writing an article for the Indian Express, so I thought video call would be. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, tell me, please.
So thank you for joining.
And
What?
this is a pre-recorded program, right?
Yes.
Right.
So when was the first time that you became aware of your caste?
I think this is something that I encounter all the time. But not only me, but almost all the Dalits encounter caste, since their childhood, because the place we live in and the way we are treated and the facilities that are accorded to our slums, that shapes our lived experiences, and that in itself exposes which caste location you're in. For instance, I grew up in a slum in my hometown, and since my childhood, when I started going to school, I wouldn't say where I come from. So people would be very happy to tell their area names and localities, right? But I have never been able to tell it, and I was not proud of the place I come from. So this feeling of being ashamed to tell your birthplace, no, it itself is a caste, experience of caste-based discrimination, I feel. And also in my teenagers, boys would usually talk to me, but they'll ask where I'm coming from. And once I tell the location I come from, they themselves judge my caste location as well. So my social location has been revealed by the place I come from, and it has so much to do in shaping my day-to-day experiences. So I think it's not like upper castes who would have to identify caste or experience caste through a specific incident. For Dalits, it's almost like a day-to-day experience.
Is there also any discrimination in the academia?
Yeah, of course. Because teachers would be very, you don't have to come from a particular caste, but if you're darker and if you're, not wearing a good suit, then the teachers wouldn't respect you, right? So from my LKG to fifth standard, I think two Brahmin boys were class leaders, either, interns. So either this guy will be the class leader and the next year he will be the class leader. And also in my childhood, I was very much interested in drama, and whenever I offer to play a role, they will make me stand at the back because I'm dark and I'm not thin as well. I used to be a little chubby kid. And they never want a big dark body to be on the front of the drama stage. So I was always made to stand at the back, and the student who was class leader, he used to score first marks. And even when we were studying third standard or fourth standard, he completed his BA in Hindi through the Hindi Prachar Sabha. So he comes from a family which invests so much time in extracurricular activities like sending him to Hindi classes, and he was also rich enough to do it. But teachers would treat us differently for the reason that we can't afford such things, and we used to tailor our uniforms through a person nearby house. But they used to get ready-made uniforms from big showrooms, and even it itself will make a very big difference on the shoes we wear. So from the childhood to the college, I think everything caste plays a role everywhere. And when I came to law college, I was very happy that I'll have to have very good friends, and most of them were from different cities, and I was the only day scholar. But then again, the scholarship thing came. When my name was on the scholarship list, then they wouldn't talk to me. So I was sitting alone at the last bench. For 5 years, I was sitting on the last bench alone. No girls would be friends with me.
Does India's fairness obsession also have something to do with the caste?
Yeah, I think it's interlinked. India's racial discrimination and caste discrimination comes from a complex nexus between the culture and caste. So, for instance, we celebrate, I mean, most of the Hindus, they celebrate cow and they don't celebrate buffaloes. Why? We don't know how come cow became a holy animal and not buffalo. So I think we have internalized this racism through our culture. And even in Diwali, in celebrating Diwali, a fair-skinned Brahmin Ram, he kills a dark-skinned Dravidian Ravana. We don't know the reason, and they have, conveniently made stories which justifies killing of dark-skinned persons. And even in Ramayana, a dark-skinned woman, Shurpanaga, who is a sister of Ravana, was also humiliated by Lakshmana. So there are many justifications through our myths and through our culture, and we never allow a dark person to enjoy the dignity as a fair person would enjoy in this country. And even in the movies, if a lead role heroine is fair skinned and chubby, they celebrate her. But if the girl is dark skinned and chubby, then she is always a comedian who would be teased by every single male in the cinema. So I think this internalization of racial discrimination also comes from caste. And in the end, if you look at the Indo-Aryan migration, they initially started discriminating from the nature of your skin tone, your appearance, where you come from. And if you're from South, North Indians would discriminate you. And if you're a woman, men would discriminate you. All these discriminations, I think, have a deeper connections with, skin color.
What does everyday discrimination in an urban setting look like?
I think these sort of questions should be asked to upper caste, persons, because they practice untouchability in so many forms. For instance, we should ask which caste person comes to your house for doing the domestic help, and whom you share your flats with, and whom they rent their flats to, and how are they looking for bride and bridegrooms, even in an urban space where we can't go for a specific caste group. And even in the matrimony, they are choosing for a particular caste. And we have slums, and slums are evicted on a regular basis. And most of them who are in the slums are Dalits and lower caste groups, so from most backward communities. But the upper caste groups who have been enjoying safe living environment in the elite households and the neighborhood, they don't care about the slum dwellers. And also, most of the time, in my experience, they tend to think that people coming from slum are criminals, and they would definitely steal something if they come to work to your house. And even films, no, in the cinema, they show a gunda person as someone who comes from Islam, who is dark skinned. So yeah, I think this portrayal of who you are and what you are is what caste about. And the basic access to education in a good educational institutions, the so-called a reputed educational institution itself constructs caste-based discrimination. For instance, a person coming from a slum, even if they had earned very good marks, they cannot go and join a reputed institution because of the fee structure. And right now in the national law universities and the other law universities, I find that the difference between gender category and the scheduled caste category is just 400 rupees. So where is social justice here? And they are just filtering out poor Dalits from entering into these institutions. So if you are third generation graduate and if your parents are in a very good job, then do you have a money? Then you can come join any reputed institution. But if you are a first generation learner and if you still can't come, I mean, if you still can't pay your fees, you cannot come to my institution. That is what the universities say. And last year, a girl from Dharavi, Mumbai, she scored very good marks, and then she also got her offer letter from medical college. But they had asked for a particular amount of fees, and she had approached a bank for mortgaging their house and to get educational loan. But the bank has denied. Why? Because her house is located in a slum. So it has no value. On the other hand, corporate companies are trying to encroach slums because it's located in the prime of the city, in the heart of the city. On the other hand, banks are not providing any loan, educational loan based on the particular property. So I think caste-based discrimination is, is economically linked to. So the fact that most of them are not able to work in a reputed institution or are still working as blue collar laborers, I think it is what caste-based discrimination in the urban cities look like.
Is there discrimination outside India also among NRIs?
Yeah, of course, we have so many examples of how caste is being practiced among the Indian diaspora. And in the US recently, a case was filed by the Californian State Department against Cisco company because two Brahmin managers have been discriminating a Dalit employee, and they have called him names, and they have told, if you had been in India, you would have been picking garbages, but since you are in the US, you are working in such a big concern. And this is a very important case. And also in 2005 or 6, I think there was a textbook case in the US again, where the Californian tech curriculum had a lesson about Indo-Aryan migration, women oppression, and caste-based discrimination in the curriculum. And the Hindu groups who are very strong in the US, they have filed a petition, and they somehow were able to even bring a bill against such lessons being taught in the schools. And also, if you take US, the first caste discrimination case was heard by the employment tribunal in 2011. And also there have been many complaints of caste-based discrimination, and the British government, it tried to bring caste under anti-discrimination law, and also to put it under equality law. But somehow the Hindu groups were very influential, and they lobbied with the conservative government, and the entire survey and the plan was dropped. But still there are many discrimination, and there is a particular provision in the UK which speaks of forced marriages and honor related crimes. So it clearly shows how caste is being practiced among the Indian Asian diaspora communities, and they practice caste in the employment and in the educational campuses, and also in providing referring letters, getting you admitted into universities, helping you with jobs and making a network, and choosing your life partner in so many ways. And even if you take Europe, Australia, US, or UK, wherever Hindu temples are being built, and again, who are the priests? All of them come from a particular Brahmin community. And this is also casteism, right? We cannot simply ignore that since the temples are Hindu temples, they can appoint whomever they want to be as priests, because we, as many people, many Dalits, they identify themselves as Hindus. And in that case, I think they deserve to be appointed as priests, and they cannot be denied any worship rights in a foreign territory. And the case of caste has been debated in the UN for a very long time. And in 1996, the CERT committee, the Committee for Elimination of Racial Discrimination, held that observed that caste comes under descent-based discrimination, so it can be construed as racial discrimination. So UN also recognizes caste in the foreign diaspora, and there are many South Asian solidarity networks working in the US, UK, and in the Europe. And there is a study in a very good university in Australia, and they are analyzing caste-based discrimination. And I think caste has already become a global problem. And I still remember in 1917, Dr. Ambedkar, in his Castes in India research paper, he told if Hindus migrate to other parts of the world, caste will become a world problem. And right now we are witnessing it.
Can you explain why we need reservation today?
So every society is constructed upon a set of social beliefs, and I think India is obviously constructed on caste-based discrimination and gender-based discrimination. And Dalits have been denied education for centuries, and the social systems and the legal system and the political system, including the educational systems, are protecting the caste prejudices, and they are in a way biased, intrinsically biased. And I think any society should have, any just society should have a representation for the oppressed communities in order to make sure that it's a diverse and inclusive space, because a society is for all. And in order to make sure that the caste-based prejudices or caste-based discrimination or gender-based discrimination is not going to deny the opportunity in education or employment, we need affirmative action. And I wouldn't say that it's just for Dalits, but also for Muslims, queer communities, and also women. Women have 33% reservation. And if you look at the meritorious argument by the upper caste groups, they have been enjoying 51% reservations for so long, but we are not questioning it. So the 3% population, they have, they have been monopolizing education. Generation learners were able to get into central universities and networks. They have parents to teach in their houses, and they have many other opportunities around the world. And in that situation, I think any society which is just should give opportunity to the first generation learners, because in the end we are providing education to make the society a literate one, right? So if 100% literacy is our goal, 100% reservation should be the way, and it is the only way possible, I guess, I think.
So there's an opinion by a certain section of people who say that we should not see caste in today's world. Do you think that helps the movement?
Denying the existence of caste is not going to help any movement, for that matter, may it be feminist movement or may it be queer movement, because unless you understand the cause of all and hierarchies, and unless you become a champion of social justice, cannot make this an equal society. So in that case, I think any ignores caste is someone who is actually ignoring the reality. So this is not going to lead us to unity or anywhere else. And I think they all know that caste exists, but they wanted to protect their privileges, and that is the reason why they keep denying it. And whenever we talk about caste, they insist that we don't politicize it, but everyone is politicizing their rights. For instance, Brahmins politicizing their rights, and they were able to bring a meritorious argument against reservation, and women have been politicizing their issues. For instance, for a very long time, violence against women were seen as family issues, as personal issues between a husband and wife. But they started politicizing the issues, and then it became a social debate, and that led to many progressive laws. And the feminist movement to a great extent politicized each and everything. And right now we are even politicizing marital rape. We are asking it to be a crime, punishable crime. So I think politicization is everywhere, and Dalits speaking about their rights. If Dalits speaking about their rights is politics, then of course it is politics, because it is the very politics that has oppressed them. And I think people would uprise only through the tool that they are being oppressed by. So in that way, I think caste has to be the main political debate in any movement.
What is your take on the merit debate?
So I think merit is something which is constructed by the Brahminical hypocrisy, because they denied education for a very long time, and they have been monopolizing it for themselves. And there are record data and statistics from the Madras presidency which shows they have been occupying the matriculation and the arts, bachelor's, engineering, and all the educational institutions for 93% in total. And also, if there is one Brahmin candidate against 125 Brahmin candidates, there was only one non-Brahmin candidate against 5,885 candidates. So you could see the difference. So for 6,000 people, there was only one eligible candidate who could be admitted into engineering college or to any bachelor's course. So yeah, where is the merit here? I mean, you didn't allow them to go to school, but now you're asking them to bring marks. And what is merit? So in my opinion, merit is something which makes you eligible. If a person who has not been literate for years, and if you wanted to study, I think that is the merit. Monopolizing is not merit. And it is a failed argument as well across the globe. Now, no one speaks of merit, and even in the foreign countries, in the recruitment processes as well, they are bringing more inclusive and diverse policies. They are mandating. In the UK, there is something called BAM. BAM is Black, African, and migrant minority groups. And even in the US, racially minority groups, linguistic minority groups, indigenous groups, and queer communities are being included in the recruitment policies. So I think this is where we are heading to, because in the international human rights basis, I think India is far behind in achieving global peace and internal peace. And it's because they are still sticking into the Brahmin meritocracy.
There's also this argument that reservations should be limited to a few generations, after which it should be done away with, so that other first generation learners receive the benefit of the reservation. What is your view on this?
I think it depends. It depends on how are we analyzing it or evaluating it, or what are the yardstick and what is the standards. There are so many private educational institutions which don't even provide reservation, but they are giving admissions to a very good money. So why are we not against it? But still, we are only against reservation because we have a convenient lie that implies that only second generation learners are able to come. If that is the truth for reservation, what about for meritocracy? What about for general category? Who are able to join into general category? For instance, in the NEET, initially the government and everybody were insisting that NEET is to ensure that only meritorious candidates are able to get into. But right now we know people who have scored, students who have scored very good marks in the +2 examinations are not getting into medical colleges, and only those who have paid lakhs and lakhs of money to the coaching classes are getting into medical colleges. So if merit is constructed by coaching classes, and if merit is constructed by money, I don't think that merit argument itself is valid. So I think we should first ensure that everyone is able to get into an educational institution without any guilt of being admitted on a scheduled caste category or reserved category. When that situation changes, people will be able to do far better. So without even going into first step, we are thinking and talking about 100th step, which in my opinion, is not necessary.
Why is it that despite providing reservation, there is very little representation of Dalits or other communities, in fact, in sectors including government jobs?
So that is where the caste bias in the institution plays a vital role. Because if you look at the higher educational institutions, most of the professors and most of the faculties come from upper caste. And when Dalit students are looking for reference letters for their higher education, they're not getting it. And bright students like Rohit Vamala and Anita are committing suicides, and they are forced by the institutions to die. So why is this happening? And let's take Hathras case. In the Hathras case, statistics say that most of the police officials are from Thakur community, and they all of them believe that SEST Act, Prevention of Atrocities Act itself, is something meaningless. So what would you do with a system like this? From the chief minister to the low cadre constable, everyone is from one particular caste, and they humiliate just 4 Valmiki families, which are living around 400 Thakur families. And for the past 10 years, there were no Dalit judges in the Supreme Court, and it was only in the last year one Dalit judge was recruited. So I think this is how the institutional bias plays out. And unless we look for representations in the recruitment processes, this is not going to end. And this institutional bias is going to worsen the situation.
Why is there such a large number of under trial Dalits in jails?
We have to ask this question to the upper caste bureaucrats, because we don't know. They file false cases, and most of the time the cases don't come to trial, and many of them have even spent their entire punishment period. Can we imagine? It's really horrible that even many Muslims who have spent their entire term of punishment are still under trial prisoners. So I don't really understand why is this thing still menace in the country where we have been upholding constitution for over 70 years. And if the criminal justice system is truly concerned about justice, I think they should release all the under trial prisoners to with an immediate effect. And also I honestly believe that the criminal justice system itself is very caste based, caste biased. And for that matter, the most of the Dalits and Muslims are in the presence to disproportionate to their entire population. And when the Jairaj Phoenix custodial death case was discussed, we all discussed about how dominant caste father and son were brutalized in a police station, when most of the custodial death victims are Dalits and Muslims. We are not discussing it. So even in discussing police brutality, we are biased ourselves, and our selective outrage and performatory wokeness is not helping the criminal justice system annihilate caste bias from it. So yeah, so I think it's clear example of how biased and prejudiced the criminal justice system is.
In the Hathras case, we also saw how a certain section of the media tried to prove that there was no rape, firstly, and secondly, an attempt to even accuse the family of the victim. So, what role does the media play in the caste system?
I think media plays a very important role in in the persistence of caste, because if you had seen the television debates until now, I think Dalits are not represented enough, and Dalit narratives are not coming out. And even when the printed media are asking us to write articles, they want us to write from personal experience and not from our professional capacity. So we know how caste operates, but they always want us to tell a pathetic story and cry. They always want violence. And this portrayal of violence has made the upper caste society and the collective conscience believe that caste is something which is only in reservation and violence and not in day-to-day practice. And I think this credit goes only to the media houses, because they are the ones who have brought this narrative. And if they had an active conversation about caste on a day-to-day basis, Hathras case would have been something entirely different. The way we look at the case, the way we discuss about the case would have been entirely different, rather than criminalizing the family or proving the rape. Who are we to decide if there has been a rape or not? There is a dying declaration, there are witnesses, and there is a medical report. And if the body had been retained, we could have asked for a second autopsy. But they have conveniently burned the body. So why did they do all this? And who did they do all this for? So such questions answer in itself why the case was dealt in a very a ridiculous manner, and also what role that media houses play. So the police officials, they publish the call records of the family, which has to be protected by right to privacy, and without any sense about data protection, the media houses are republishing it in their television channels, and they are discussing if the calls would have constituted a crime, or if the calls would have led to honor crime. So if a man and woman are in a relationship, it doesn't mean that there cannot be any offense. So it can always mean that when two persons are from a different caste and he could have promised to stay in a relationship, but he would have thought to cheat because they wouldn't love a Dalit woman, coming to the families and getting married to a Dalit woman. There are so many other aspects as well. But who are we to decide all these things? It is for the court to decide. It is for the prosecution to produce only the evidence and not to provide such evidences to the media houses. I'm totally against such media trials.
There is a view, and even Gandhiji said this, that claiming caste identity divides the society. What is your view on this?
I think upper caste have to tell this because most of us are not proud of our surnames. And in Tamil Nadu, we don't have surnames at all. Even Dalit communities don't have surnames. So I think people who are having this Iyer, Iyengar, Sharma, Patel, all these upper caste, Thakur, all these upper caste surnames, they should tell why are they dividing society by claiming their caste identity. We are not proud of our caste. They are proud of their caste.
So in India, they say we don't cast our votes; we vote our caste. So what is the Dalit point of view of identity politics?
I don't agree to the point that Dalit movement or anything related to electoral politics and Dalits or Dalit identity politics, because even Brahmins do their caste identity politics, and any upper caste are doing identity politics, and being a woman is also an identity, being a queer is identity. So I think everyone is operating from their identical positions. So yeah, I think I don't have to answer to this specifically because electoral politics is purely based on caste identity. And why do you think the police, the state, and everybody is for Thakur community? Why 144 was implemented only on the Dalit neighborhood and not on the Thakur neighborhood? How 500 Thakur men were able to mobilize and they were able to organize and demand justice for the rapists? And how they were able to run caste panchayats in UP, Rajasthan, Bihar for so long? Because caste politics, they are doing caste politics, not us.
Does symbolic representation help since our president is Dalit?
I don't think so. I think BJP is conveniently, appointing Dalit persons into higher positions and as leaders, but I don't think even their party members are respecting them. So they wanted to make the Dalits on the ground believe that BJP is a pro-Dalit party, which is not true. And they are using Dalit Bahujan communities, I mean the SC, ST, OBC communities, to revolt against Muslims in the making of Hindu Rashtra. And that is why they have been trying to influence Dalit youths in the slums and in the rural areas. But at the same time, in the places like Taku, I mean in the Hathras and in other cases, they are rallying for the upper caste rapist groups. So I think the Dalit youths who are in the BJP should have by now realized that they are being used as weapons against Muslims and nothing else.
Ambedkar has been called an anti-national for giving more importance to social equality than the freedom struggle. What is your view on this entire issue?
Yeah, so there is one particular statement from Dr. Ambedkar that was after Balagangadhar Tilak claimed in the Constituent Assembly that Swaraj is our birthright. So he said Swaraj is our birthright, and then Dr. Ambedkar says if he had been a Dalit and untouchable, then he would have said annihilation of caste is my birthright, equality is my birthright. So I think what is freedom? The notion of freedom depends on the place you come from. So for untouchables, freedom is annihilation of caste. For untouchables, equality is annihilation of caste. For untouchables, even democracy and self-rule is something which is always related to caste. But upper caste groups are very privileged and they don't even have the concern to think about the Indian Swarajya scheme, because they always wanted wanted the British to leave. And when the British left, they wanted to take all the power for them. They didn't want to share it to the OBCs or ACSTs for that matter. So they are hypocrites. And I think Dr. Ambedkar called their hypocrisy right, right there. And I'm very proud about it. And even if they call me anti-national, I would say definitely, because I'm not for a nation which is caste biased. I'm not for a nation which oppresses women. And I'm also not for a nation which rapes women and the state that supports upper caste rapists. And I'm not for a nation which is not recognizing the rights of minorities and queers. So at that point of time, if this nation is going to continue to oppress minority communities and Dalits, then I'm totally anti-national.
What is the starting point to unlearn caste prejudice?
I think acknowledging that caste exists is the starting point. Unless you acknowledge something, unless you admit that you are having some trouble, you can't take treatment, right? If you keep denying that you're well, there is no disease for you, then in the end, you're going to die of your disease. And Dalits are anyway brutalized. We are anyway insecure in the country. So we are not going to be affected much. It is it is women and the other OBC groups who are going to be treated in a very bad manner, and they are going to suffer a lot.
What are some common mistakes by upper caste allies?
Yeah, so most of the time they think they can take leadership and they can represent us for the fact that they are anti-caste, but not so. And many of them, they do only the rewarding work. They are not ready to work as a normal member of an anti-caste groups. And many of them think that the fact that many of us can't speak in English means that they can take over and appropriate our spaces. Not necessarily. And learning, caste from their households has been something which comes with them, even to the anti-caste platforms. So unlearning the caste practices is equally very important. And that might come from how you look at a person, what food you eat, how you ask someone to behave, what you expect from someone, and when you are in a media house, what you ask someone to write. So this anti-caste person might be an ally to the Dalit movement, and he might be working in a media house. But when he is instructing a Dalit person to write something on a specific line, then it itself is a privilege. So saying no when they are invited to lead any anti-caste movement is the first thing. And the second thing, unlearning the caste practices and the unconscious biases that they are being brought up with. And thirdly, recognizing their privileges and trying to leave away the privileges by standing on the back and passing the mic.
What are the long-term and short-term?
How many questions do you
last
have?
Question.
You keep going and going and going. Yeah,
last
definitely.
question. Yeah. So what are the long-term and short-term solutions to annihilate the caste system?
So I think short-term is people acknowledging caste and fighting for the rights, and also seeking justice for the offenses committed or the discrimination that they witness. For instance, a Dalit person might be discriminated on a class, and other upper caste students might be sitting, remaining silent, and they would be mute spectators. I don't think that's going to work. So if you witness a discrimination, you stand up, you raise the voice, and you support the concerned person. And in the long run, annihilation of caste is the only solution for any form of equality, may it be gender equality or may it be removing caste inequalities. Annihilation of caste is the only way forward.